The following is an encore presentation of stories from the Dooralong Transformation Centre. Just gone 9 minutes past 10 here on this beautiful sunny Wednesday morning. Sat opposite me across the desk, we've still got Gary. He hasn't run away or anything. We've got Gary from the Dooralong Transformation Centre. Before the news, Gary was telling us that he'd been at Dooralong for all up in different roles that he's been playing there. We'll talk about those later. In those different roles, he's been there about 14 months. So what about life pre-Dooralong? What was it like for you?
It was pretty horrible.
Pretty horrible?
Yeah, I was living in a very rough area. I don't know if I should say the suburb, you know. People might know, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but it was a very housing commission sort of area and very drug-ridden sort of place. I wasn't actually living in a place, living in, you know, wherever I could get a bed at, or, you know, the lounge, hopping from place to place, and heavily addicted to drugs.
And how long had that been going on?
Oh, probably the last 6-7 years.
Long time.
It is a long time.
6 or 7 years of, was it a downwards? Did it start gently and you thought, oh, I've got this under control, and then just...
Well, I was, previous to that, I was working for Lifeline as a truck driver, and that was in from about 2012 to 2014, and then I was made redundant at the end of 2014. Couldn't afford to pay the rent where I was living. I had a friend that was in this area that I was talking about, and he offered me a room there.
Yeah.
So before that, I started sort of, you know, now once in a month.
Dabbling.
Yeah, dabbling in it and, you know, so forth. But then when I was made redundant, had a $6,000 payout. That was like, you know, and then it was starting to get a little bit more and more, and so that, from there it sort of spiraled downhill very quickly.
So that's when it started to snowball and get really serious for you.
Yeah.
So what sort of drugs are we talking about?
Basically pot, you know, as much as I could. Ice, and that started. The ice started off as a sort of a payday thing. You know, every time I got my pay, then it continued on to as much as I could.
Yeah.
And that was mainly for the first 4 or 5 years. Last 2.5 years, previous, I'd started getting into the heroin.
Yeah. Do you ever look back and ask yourself, or did you ask yourself at the time, why am I doing this? Why am I taking these drugs? What is it? What are they giving me?
Oh, to start off with, after the redundancy, it was more sort of to try and cover up the loss sort of thing, and yeah, I had some issues too in my head, sort of, you know, mental issues that I hadn't addressed for a long time, so that was starting to play a bit more heavily in my head once I was redundant. When you're productive and got a job, they don't seem to be there as much. I suffer from a lot of depression and anxiety. So the drugs was just that quick fix that, you know, and then once it got a little bit bad and I was in this area which was very hard to escape from, that seemed like the easiest option to go to every time. Yeah.
So if you're feeling depressed, anxious, concerned about anything, it was the sort of, the go-to option, as you said.
Yeah.
And it gave you an escape for a short time.
Short time, yeah.
Yeah, short time escape. Did people around you notice that Gary's not quite the Gary we used to know? Something's happening for him.
Well, the people that I know were heavily into drugs as it is. You know, so the people before, when I was working, not so much. You know, I came from Nelson Bay, was living out there, and then I moved into Newcastle. So I didn't really know anybody at that point. So I was just really working, and had a workmate that I used to hang out with a bit. But then, once I lost a job, moved into this area where everyone was taking drugs. That was their daily thing.
Yeah. And you say it started with cannabis, and then it went. Did it progress through the sort of the ice, and then the even harder drugs?
When I was made redundant, or from the beginning?
From the beginning.
Oh yeah, when I was 14, 15, I started, you know, smoking pot. You know, drinking before that, you know, on the Friday, Saturday nights, and then got into the pot a little bit as I got to about 15, 16, and then once I got to 18, being able to go to clubs and that's when the sort of harder drugs started to hit, which at that point it was just a party thing.
So they've always been part of your life?
Always, yeah.
Always, since you were sort of a young lad at school.
Well, I think I was always escaping life. Like, I had some issues with my family and, you know, things that had happened when I was young that I believe it was a trauma, because the trauma is a very personal thing. It's not what some people think is trauma, it's how it affected you.
Yeah,
personally.
I can understand that. What might sort of trigger you and be a trauma for you isn't the same for me. What triggers me may not trigger you, sort of thing.
That's correct, yeah. So I was escaping all the time. You know, I was in my own little world, and then when it got to the stage where I was introduced to drugs, I thought, well, this is so much easier. I don't have to constantly be in this mindset of trying to escape.
Yeah. So, I'm just thinking out loud now. I wonder how we can learn from the lesson of the past. What is it? Because you were still at school at the time, weren't you, Gary?
Yes.
Yeah. There were school counsellors or school teachers and the staff at school. Do they need to be more aware of it, or do they need sort of education on spotting the signs that somebody is perhaps starting to take drugs? How can we intervene at that very early stage in a meaningful way?
I think it should start in primary school.
Yeah.
With educational, you know, which I think they do at this point, I'm not sure, but I think that's the best way to start getting people, and having people that have gone through this trauma, you know, because I hear people that are starting as young as 10 or 11, you know. Get people that are 16 or 17 to do the talks, you know, not...
It's no good, you know, the smart, respectable, middle-class teacher.
No, that's right. We used to have, you know, sometimes a talk in high school, but it was like this, you know, intellectual person that's probably never touched it, so it doesn't sink home to you.
No,
but if you get that young person coming in and telling their story of how it's ruined their life,
and especially if they've walked some of the journey that you've walked, if they've lived the life and they've experienced the, you know, the tough times that you've experienced, they have more authenticity, don't they?
They do, yeah. And not that I can't say that other people might be able to help you. It's just that you do have a more understanding. You know, you can understand where that person's coming from. You're more likely to listen.
So when you were having these drugs talks at school by these people, these intellectuals, or very well presented, it just didn't have any impact on you at all?
No.
None whatsoever?
No, it was like, they would talk about marijuana being a gateway drug and that, I'm like, yeah, whatever. And then they'd talk about short-term memory loss and all this, and it was just water off a duck's back, you know. But I only sort of clicked when I was in my late 30s and I'd go into the kitchen, I'm like, what was I in here for? And then I started realising that, wow, they were right about that. But as kids, we're not going to listen to grown-ups, you know.
It's the way the message is presented, isn't it? Not so much what they say, but the authenticity of the person who's sort of addressing the kids.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. So eventually, Gary, you must have found out about Dooralong.
Yes, well, unfortunately with my addiction in the kind of area, when you start to do it a daily event, because I ended up having a friend that was a dealer. I started getting drugs nearly every day, spacing it out over the week. But then once the addiction got worse, I couldn't afford drugs, so I had to supplement it with some illegal activity, you know, which was going to shops and stealing for people stuff that they need, because that addiction started getting hold of me and I needed it every day. So that started getting me in trouble with the law. Ended up going to jail. I've had a few little remands in jail. But then I was let off by the courts, and then 2017, I ended up doing 8 months in jail. That 8 months, I was like, that's when it sort of the penny dropped, as in, I don't want to be doing this anymore. I knew, because I got clean in jail. I was feeling good. You know, had all my mental faculties back and everything was clear. I was relaxed, and I thought, I'm going to go back out and use again, aren't I? I had this feeling that this was going to happen. I was going to go back to work because I had nowhere to go. They give you temporary housing when you get out of jail for 4 or 5 days, maybe a week if you're lucky, and then it's see you later.
On your own.
Yeah, so I knew the only people I knew were these drug addicts, the only places I had to go were back there.
You're set up for failure, really, aren't you?
Well, you are. Like they've got a program now that's set to go, which they try and set you up in houses, but these houses are located in drug areas anyway. So they're trying, I suppose. But yeah, so at that point I knew that I really need to break this cycle somehow. But then it was just too hard basket. How am I going to do that? I'm going to get clean. Now I'm going to try and look for a house that I'm a drug addict with no job.
Yeah.
Trying to move into a different area. It all gets a bit overwhelming and too much, so better the devil you know.
And did you have an awareness that you would not be able to do it on your own?
Oh, definitely not.
You just knew that?
No.
You knew yourself well enough to know that, look, I'm not going to be able to do this.
No.
Yeah.
No, I knew 100%. There's no way I could. So, that just got pushed on the back burner. Started doing drugs, gone again, sort of got into heroin. This bloke that I met in jail was from the area. Started getting into heroin with him now and again, just a little bit, when I've been up for too long, just to get, and then it started overtaking the ice. And then, with heroin, ice, you just sleep off when you've been up for too long. Heroin, you're not sleeping, you've got to get your next hit. Yeah. If you stay for too long and get sick, you can't move. So you got to get up, you got to do something to get that. And that's when I started getting a little bit into the illegal side of things a bit much. And
so you end up back in jail, like that revolving door.
That's right. And ended up being picked up on a warrant. And that was when I knew this was the time, was when I was actually picked up on the warrant, and I was glad. I was happy to be arrested. Because even though I knew I was going to jail, I was glad that I wasn't in the place I was. Even if it was, I knew at that stage, as soon as I saw the lawyer for the first bail hearing, I said to him, I'd like drug court. He goes, don't you want to see if you can get bail? I said, am I going to get it? He goes, no. I said, well, can I go for drug court? I don't want to go to jail and get put back out.
Yeah.
I know that I'm just going to go straight back to where I was. Yeah. So that's when the process started with the drug court. Then I was in jail, and I had a cellmate that actually said really good things about Dooralong. He'd been there 3 or 4 years ago for alcohol issues, which cured him, but he was on different related matters.
Yeah, unrelated.
Yeah, but he said it's a great place. It's, the people there are lovely. It's Christian atmosphere, and I didn't know anything about Christians, so I thought,
give it a go.
Give it a go.
Don't lose anything.
And the big thing was that he said that they help you all the way through. It's a long term. It's not just get clean, get out of here. It's like they help you with the housing and everything as you progress. And I think that's what I needed, a long term, whole change of life, not just
quick fixes.
No, anyone can get up clean time. You go in the bush for 6 months, get clean.
Yeah,
that's not going to help you.
We're going to pause. We're going to pause for some music, and we'll come back to Gary. Somebody has now sort of 28 minutes past 10 here on this Wednesday morning. We're talking to Gary, who's spent the last 14 months or so at the Dooralong Transformation Centre. We left Gary's story at that point where he has asked to go to drug court, and they have mandated him to go to Dooralong, which is where he wanted to go. It must have been a bit of a difference. I mean, one day you're in prison and the next day you're in Dooralong. That's a bit of a black and white thing, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. It was a big shock to the system, which was a good shock in a way, because I was glad to be there, because that's where I wanted to be. I knew that I had to do something about my life, whether I was 100% committed to it or not. I knew that this is what I had to do. And because the only other way, or the only thing that else would happen I'd be back into a place where I was.
So it felt right.
It felt right, yeah.
Sometimes in life we find ourselves in situations and they just feel right, don't they? And that was one of those for you.
It took me a while to adjust, because coming from being on the streets and with hard people that that are trying to rip you off all the time, you've got your guard up all the time, and then these people are overly nice,
Yeah.
So it was overwhelming to have that support, and that, which, when you're not used to it, can be intimidating to a certain degree.
Yeah, and especially a little bit suspicious. What do they want from me, sort of thing? What's their angle? Why are they being nice to me?
It takes a while to realise that these people are just wanting to be nice, and they're wanting to to help you to get well.
That's what the world does to us, doesn't it? It sort of makes us suspicious of nice people, which is crazy.
It is.
Yeah. So you were at Dooralong. The first Wednesday evening you were at Dooralong, you would have been invited along to their chapel night. How did you find that?
Well, that was an experience because I've never ever. The only time I've been in church was for a wedding, and you're just tapping your toe to get to the reception, to get the drink. So I've never experienced. I've always been curious about it. You hear of these people that find God, and then all of a sudden their whole life is changed. So I was always interested in that aspect of it, but I had no prior knowledge of it whatsoever. So it was quite an eye opener. And how was it? It wasn't full on.
Confronting as well, isn't it? Look, if you've had no experience of that type of worship service, for somebody as an outsider to come in, I mean, I would be thinking to myself, what have I got myself into?
Well, the chapel, it's made up of awards, and it's a quite light sort of. There's a talk, there's a sermon at the end or whatever. But I think the first Sunday, because it's mandatory to go to a church on Sunday before the COVID hit and that.
Yes.
So every Wednesday you'd have chapel, and then Sunday morning you'd go to church. So that was a big shock, because I was like, look how happy these people are.
What are they on?
Yeah, they're generally happy. And then, the first one was very curiosity. Then the second one, I was starting to get like this warm feeling, and they're singing the songs and got like a little shiver up the back of my spine. I thought, what's going on here? It might be a cult, and I'm getting dragged in. Yeah, but I just started realising that there's got to be something good to this, And then it wasn't until we do induction when I first get there, and the first 3 steps are always the first one I think is to realise that your life has become unmanageable, and then to hand your will over to a higher power, and to realise that God started coming into it. I'm like, whoa, I don't know about this, handing my will, God. And then it wasn't until one of the facilitators said, well, your way of life hasn't worked. What have you got to lose? And that just hit me. Like, I just thought to myself, I could justify things or rationalise things in my head, but that one just really stuck with me because I've tried everything, and sooner or later, I'd have my clean periods, but sooner or later, they would start getting back in. I'd be getting back into the drugs and that. So, and then one of the facilitators said, "Look, I can guarantee you, having faith or religion will not make your life any worse. If it just makes it a tiny little bit better, what's the harm?" So I thought to myself, I've really got to give this a go. And that's when I sort of put my head into the program with an open mind. And I was practicing praying, and before I believed. That's what they said. Just start the process, the practicing. I was a little bit, because you hear a lot of things, and when you go to Sunday and they do sermons about, people getting put into furnaces and then coming out, and you're like, well. So, but I just, the people at Longevity Church that I go to, Salvation Church, they were just lovely and welcoming. Like Andrew, the pastor there, he said, look, I don't care where you come from, what you've done, what you wear, just turn up.
God doesn't care, why should we?
No, and I never felt more welcome anywhere in my life, sort of thing. So, and I'd have chats with him every Sunday about things and that, I was curious about, and he used to say God loves questions, He loves you to question things and ask him about things. So I was very new to this whole thing, so I thought it's worked for a lot of people here, and it has changed people's lives, so I'm gonna give it a go.
And has there been a point at which you you said you had difficulty with this whole idea of surrendering your will. Was there a point at which you sort of surrendered your will to God?
At one chapel service, we had some people come from North Lakes, Salvation Army, and I had a lady and her friend pray for me, and another friend, Jeff, Felice and David, and all 3 of them prayed for me. And then, because before that, I was getting up, at chapel, they say, would you like to come down to get someone to pray for you? go to Sunday. If you want someone to pray for you, come down the front. And I'd be starting to itch and get off my chair. Then I'm like, no,
this isn't for you.
Yeah, no, don't do this. And then that one Wednesday at chapel, I decided to get up, and I got to the next row and sat back down. And then this lady and gentleman walked past, and she just said, "Do you want someone to pray for you?" And I said, "Yes, I do, actually."
That's all it takes, isn't it? Sometimes somebody it's hard to do it on your own. It just needs somebody to say, "Would you like prayer?"
Yeah,
and makes it easy.
Makes it easy. So I didn't go down the front. They sat there, got another gentleman, and asked me
at church.
At church, yeah, and asked me if I'd want to. Because at that point, that was about 4-5 weeks into the program, and I really wanted the change in my life. You know, I was still up in there about a few things, little things, but I knew I wanted change. I knew I wanted to have some peace in my life. Because before that, my head miles that I used to do all the time were just crazy, So I just wanted a bit of peace and a bit of joy.
Yeah.
Natural, not happiness, because happiness is derived from something you get or you see, but peace. Eternal joy, peace, yeah. And that's, I said, look, I'm not greedy. I just want a bit of peace and joy. She prayed for me that night, and something happened. For the next week, I was trying to rationalise it and explain to myself, and I had to come down to the thing of that I was changed that night. I asked for it, and I received it. Even now talking about it, I sort of...
sound as if you're surprised.
Yeah.
And it's an emotional moment, isn't it?
It is.
It is. Your life has changed. You can put it no more simply than that. Your life has changed.
She prayed and said, well, for the next week you'll experience the joy and the peace that you can have. And I did. The next week I had this attitude of waking up in the morning and things were okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't really explain it and still can't now.
They say it's the peace that passes all understanding. In other words, we don't understand where it comes from or how it works.
No.
It just is.
But it's just a knowing that everything will be okay.
Yeah. And a realistic understanding that life will have its ups and downs, but even in the down times, we have somebody with us who can sort of put their arms around us metaphorically and sort of walk us through those bad times.
Yeah.
Well,
every time I have some challenging times, I put it in perspective. The place I was in before I went to Dooralong was a very dark place.
Yeah.
Of drugs and whatnot. So my little hard times at the moment,
in comparison,
nothing compared to what I was with. So I've got to really tell myself that, remind myself that things are pretty good, Gary. And even if there is a hard time, it's only a moment. It's only a moment in time. Yeah. It's even with my emotions, like I understand that this will pass, and I know that sooner or later I will feel better again. So.
And you call yourself a Christian now?
I do.
Good.
Born again Christian, yeah.
Excellent. Break for some more music, and then we'll come back and see and talk to Gary about what the future might hold. In the last little segment, how he has become what he describes himself as being a born-again Christian, and it was quite a remarkable tale of those people at the Longevity Church, the Salvos Church, who just sat down with him one day after the service and prayed for him, and he accepted Christ into his life. He is born again. What does the future hold for you, Gary? Well, of course, none of us know the answer to that, but what would you like the future hold for you?
Just before that, can I say that I'd just like to thank Dooralong for everything they've done. The people there are unbelievable. Every single one of them's there to help you, and their love for helping people in addiction is amazing.
It is. They do incredible work. The Salvos are just the hands and feet of Jesus throughout the world.
That's right. Yeah. So without them, I wouldn't be here where I am now talking to you. So I'm really thankful for them.
Yeah. Okay. The future.
At the moment, being in a transitional house, I'm not trying to focus on that because the past can't help me, and worrying about the future too much will also
it might raise anxiety levels.
I have to make plans, of course, but my son's moving up to Ipswich because he's finished his he's in the army as an electrical apprentice, and he's finished his trade, and he's getting posted up there. So he's asked me to go and move up there with him, which is great. It gives me a chance to start afresh somewhere.
Somewhere where you're not known and where there aren't people there that will try and sort of draw you back into that drug scene.
I couldn't go to Newcastle again because, everyone I bump into. So that's good to start there. Being with my son. Yeah, I'll pick up a bit of work. Yes. Hopefully it might be a bit difficult because I've got a lot of, blank areas for the last 6 or 7 years.
Yeah. But look, God is on your case. He's working through you, and look, he already knows what work you're going to get.
Well, I'm just happy for my peace and the joy I have now every day. So, obviously I need some financial to keep myself going, but my health and my mental health is the thing that I really enjoy at the moment. And so, that's the future looking for me. It's every day seems to get better, so I'm only just looking forward to the future and how much better
God's got in surprise.
That's right.
Surprises for you. How do you manage a chapel night like this evening? You're not going to be able to sing. How's that going to work?
No, it's a bit difficult. It's not.
It's not the same.
No, it's not the same.
No.
Yeah.
But look, I'm sure you get a great message. You still get your meal, but that singing was such a powerful part of the chapel night, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I'd see tough and hard men come in, and then by a couple of months you could see them over in the with their mates yelling and really getting into the songs. So. It's a bit of a shame, but that's the health directive.
Yeah, and look, we understand the reason why. We're not complaining. We're just sort of disappointed, but fully understanding the reason why it is necessary.
Yeah.
Well, take our love back to. Well, you're not going back to Dooralong. You're going back to. Is it Sealer Farm?
Sealer Farm there in Berkeley, Fountaindale.
Fountaindale. Yeah. So take our love and best regards back to everybody there, and just to sort of repeat what you said earlier, just to thank the Salvos for all the great work that they do, not just at Dooralong, but through all their other programs of financial counselling, relationship counselling, helping out with bushfires and floods. They're just always there, aren't they?
They are. They're a great group of people that you can really rely on when you come to hard times in your life. You know that they'll be there.
Does that mean that going forward, wherever you go, you might be looking for a Salvos church, even if you went to Ipswich?
Definitely. I've already asked about, because there's a rehabilitation centre up there as well. The Salvos do.
Yeah.
So just in Brisbane, there's a Salvos church there that I'm going to get a heads up for, and they can introduce me to them before I go up. And I'll definitely be going. I go to church every Sunday. Now it's back open.
Yes.
Well, it's every second weekend until December, and then it's every week. So I'll be attending every Sunday, and
just to maintain that connection with the Salvos.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Gary. Thanks very much. We do pray God will, now that you've accepted him into the driving seat of your life, that he will steer your life so that you do get that joy and the peace, and eventually a job that fulfills you as well. So thanks, Gary, for coming in and being so honest with us.
Great. Thank you.
Let's listen. You've been listening to an encore presentation of the Dooralong stories, which can be heard live every Wednesday at 10 a.m. and repeated 8 p.m. Sunday and 1 a.m. Wednesday, right here on 94.9 rema.cc.